Today we're showing Defiance, which is a third-person shooter on a mass scale. And what that means essentially is you are playing in the same world with thousands of other players. And not just against each other, but also playing against our AI, playing against computer-controlled enemies. And pretty much you're going on missions, you're working with friends, you're meeting people. We build these huge social structures. So when you see these thousands of players going around, you can join them, you can make clans, really kind of doing something that hasn't been done with a real third-person shooter.
Is this new ground for you as far as introducing an MMO to a console system?
Yeah, you know, there haven't been very many MMOs on console systems, and you know, there's been maybe one on Xbox 360, which was very early on, Final Fantasy, I believe it was. So it's entirely a new thing. It's not just new for us, but it's also new for Microsoft and to some extent Sony. So it's really kind of figuring out how we can get these games, these huge scale games with thousands of players onto the console, and working with the first party, Microsoft and Sony, to kind of figure out how we get these games onto their system. You know, Microsoft hasn't really done it before. Sony, it's fairly new to them, but also, you know, it's a closed system. It's been out for a few years, really kind of trying to figure out how we're going to build this large game space with this amount of players. In a massively online game, you don't control the players, so if they decide they want to show up in a single spot with hundreds of others, they're going to do it, and we want to allow them to do that. That's part of the social experience. So really figuring out how we can fit them all into that game space and be able to render them all on the screen. And we've done that in a multitude of ways. We build a rule set to say, what things do I really need to render? What things can I maybe not have to render right away, and kind of shift it in and out based on those priorities. So you start with a basic character, and then over time you can progress that character. We have thousands of weapons that gain in power over time that you'll be able to access. You won't be able to access some of the high-level weapons early on, but over time you'll be able to get them as you go. And you'll also be able to customize the weapons, so you can put new stocks on them, you can put new scopes, new clips, new barrels, all sorts of stuff that you can really kind of make the weapon the way you want it. And it's visual as well as statistical.
Could you tell us a little bit about the story and the landscape of the game?
Yeah, so the game takes place in San Francisco. The real brief version of the backstory is there was aliens out in a solar system who realized early on that their system was going to be destroyed. So they built these arks that was able to take their flora and their fauna and representative of their species, and the only place they found to go was Earth. But when they got here, they realized, oh, well, here we are. There's humans already. They negotiate, you know, colonization rights, all this stuff. Needless to say, it breaks down. It becomes chaos. A war starts, but the ships are still in orbit with all their colonization machines. Mysteriously, those all get sabotaged. They rain down on Earth. Their colonization machines automatically start to transform the Earth. The game takes place roughly 40 years later, where there's no central governments anymore, there's no mass communication, and the Earth's been a combination of alien and human. And we take place in San Francisco, and the television show takes place in St. Louis.
Could you tell us a little bit about the television show and how it interacts with the game?
Yeah, there's a lot of interaction. Because we started talking to Sci-Fi on day one, we figured out what they needed to make a great show, what we needed to make a great game, and how we were going to have these interactions work. One of the big examples we've been using up to this point has been the main character will start in the game. The game starts 2 weeks before the television show. The main character will go on missions with the player, and at the end of that mission line, he gets an object, a crystal, that then, when he takes off to go to St. Louis, he uses at the beginning of the show to get an object that has a huge impact on the pilot. But beyond that, we have things like another character that is starting in the show will come back to the game, go on missions with the player, and then return to the show before the end of the season and talk about the things that they did within the game. Those are just some examples.